What's going on, everyone? Darkside Phil here with another impromptu vlog. And normally, again, I don't do this kind of vlog on the cuff, but there's been all these rumors swirling in the gaming world for about a week now regarding an impending delay of the release of Final Fantasy XV, a game that's been in development for a ridiculously long time in comparison to the development life cycles of other video games in this modern era. A game that's been monstrously hyped by Square Enix over the past 2 years. I mean, there was a playable demo of the game in the summer of 2015. Here we are almost entering the fall of 2016 and the game's not out yet. I mean, how many games have that kind of a development cycle where they have all this crazy amount of hype built around it? There's episodes of this online show based around the game. There's a movie coming up based around the game. There's all this supplementary content meant to hype up the release of Final Fantasy XV. And I didn't talk about the rumor about this game being delayed until today, simply because it was rumor. There was really nothing out there as corroborating evidence that this game was going to be delayed. Square Enix had been very adamant. Oh, it's coming out on September, 30th, I believe, the final day of September of 2016. And keep in mind, they gave us that release date a long time ago. It wasn't like, oh, that was a release date from a couple weeks ago, and now they're kind of flubbing on it. No, this is a release date that had been out for a good, 4 months or so, and everyone had been excited about the game. Everyone ran out and pre-ordered the game after all the information at E3 and all of that. And all of the hype based around the game having all this supplementary content by Square Enix, everyone's like, they're gotta deliver. They're gonna, have this game out on September 30th. And so with all the reports this past week from these game sites saying, oh, well, maybe it's gonna be delayed. There's strong evidence it may be delayed, but we really don't have anything concrete yet. We're just hearing from, like, industry insiders. Most people were skeptical, including the Final Fantasy fan base, saying, no, it's not going to be delayed. There's no way. It's definitely coming out. They're going to live up to their promises. And so, with all this happening, I talked a little bit about this on Twitter, but I didn't want to make a video until we finally had some evidence. Well, ladies and gentlemen, unless someone has done the most elaborate ruse ever, which I really don't foresee happening, we have concrete evidence that Final Fantasy XV is delayed, and I'm going to show you right now that evidence, as made public on the internet this morning. Well, actually, it was overnight that this was made public. As you can see here, this is a direct marketing instruction printout for GameStop employees saying, well, if you already have this standee for Final Fantasy XV standing in your stores to advertise the release of the game, we now need you to take this new sticker that we're mailing you and basically paste it over the bottom of the sign showing the new release date of February 29th, 2016, which effectively means that Final Fantasy XV is being delayed for 2 months, which totally changes the whole ball game, which I'm going to explain to you in just a moment here. So first off, is this picture confirmed by GameStop or confirmed by Square Enix yet? No. Alright, no. So right now, this is still rumor, and I want to clarify that for everyone. I'm making this video, and who knows, the next day or two, maybe we can get some crazy-ass flip, and someone will say this was a doctored image or whatever. I'm just saying it's incredibly unlikely that someone would doctor an image like that. For what? What would be the point, right? And the fact that not only is it an image, but it's not like a GIF, right? It's not just a picture. You can tell it's printed on paper. It's a picture taken of the paper skewed to the side. That leads me to believe that it's a real thing that's going to happen or is happening right now in GameStop stores, versus if someone had doctored a quick image or something on the internet in Photoshop, you would be able to tell, oh, that's just a something that someone put together. It looks real. It looks legit, all right? And the other thing is, Square Enix has not denied it. It would be one thing if, like, this was completely untrue, then Square Enix would come right out and say, no, it's untrue, don't worry, we have confidence the game's still coming out on September 30th. They haven't done that. They're just completely dodging the question completely and not answering anyone. Therefore, this strongly leans towards being factually correct. So what does this mean? Let's take a look a little bit. September 30th, if you actually look at the game release schedule for this year, it almost looks like most game developers purposely stayed away from September 30th when they heard that Final Fantasy 15 was being released on that date. If you actually take a look, there's like almost nothing coming out the week before besides like a new version of Sonic Boom, okay? And there's nothing coming out for the week after until the very end of the week. There's Mafia 3. So you're talking a good 10 plus days around the release of Final Fantasy 15 in late September that it looks like most game developers said we're staying away because we want nothing to do. We know that Final Fantasy is a Salesforce dynamo, and that even though this series has kind of fallen into almost disrepair in the past several years, that there's probably going to be a lot of hype based around the game, considering Square Enix has hyped the living shit out of this game for years. I mean, we could talk about the history of this game, and we will in just a moment. But the bottom line is people know that the game's going to sell. The game could be a piece of shit. This game, you could put it into your fucking PlayStation 4, Xbox One, boot it up, and it could be a 2-hour-long piece of dog duty. And it would still sell 6 million copies, because that's the installed fan base that Final Fantasy has, being such a long-running RPG franchise that's synonymous with gaming, right? And that's honestly kind of sad in my opinion, because I think there has been a lot of drop-off in the quality of Final Fantasy games in the past 10 plus years, right? Starting with Final Fantasy 13 and the fact that it was a drawn-out trilogy, which no one asked for, and then Final Fantasy 14 being all but a failed MMO. Who talks about Final Fantasy 14? No one. I mean, that game was a fucking flop. So I know when I make a video like this, right? Anything to do with Final Fantasy or negative about Final Fantasy, there's gonna be millions of downvotes and, oh, Phil's a fucking asshole because he's talking negatively about Final Fantasy. Whatever. I'm here to basically relay news and tell you my take on it, alright? So everyone knew with the fan base behind Final Fantasy that it was going to be hype and everyone's going to be just talking about this game on its release, whether it's good or bad, right? So game developers literally stayed away from the release window, knowing that it would basically be suicide for their own games to try to release near the release of Final Fantasy 15. But if Final Fantasy 15 is really being delayed until November 29th, this means a few things, alright? Number one, if you actually take a look at the end of November, there's no games coming out at the end of November. In fact, most game developers have purposely strayed away from late November releases because they know that that's like the Thanksgiving and then Black Friday weekends. And traditionally, I think what game developers have seen is when you release a big release around that time, that it doesn't get as much emphasis as when you release it either just before or just after. So Final Fantasy 15 is basically, oh, we need an empty release date now because we're delaying the game. And they just slap it into the empty week, not realizing that purposely game developers have stayed away for that week for a reason for the past few years. Number two, and this is the big one for me. If you're not aware, the week after that, we're talking, it's December 6th, so 1 week after the supposed new release date for Final Fantasy 15, we've got South Park: The Fractured But Whole and Dead Rising 4 releasing on the same day. This December is one of the biggest gaming Decembers in recent memory. In fact, I'm going to go as far to say in the past 5 years, the last game, maybe 4 years, excuse me, because I don't remember, but the last game that really had like emphasis as a giant game for the month of December was Skyrim. If you remember, Skyrim actually released in like late November several years. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not 100% on what year it was. But that game, of course, it was huge, giant amount of content. So everyone was playing Skyrim during the month of December that year. But outside of that, just take a look at some of the games that have come out that really weren't big priorities for December. Like, I mean, yeah, Far Cry. I believe Far Cry 3 and 4 both released kind of really late in the year, those years when they came out, and so those kind of carried weight those years. You had Dragon Age Inquisition, but did any of those games really hold weight? And the answer really is no. You know, they came out, they had their hype for a week or two, and yes, they have their installed fan bases, but basically December is usually a slow month for gaming. You don't get high-profile releases released in December. This year of 2016 is the exception. South Park and Dead Rising 4 releasing on the same day basically makes December a blockbuster month for gaming. And especially because you know those are going to be longer, more drawn-out games. Those aren't 5-hour gaming experiences. Those are 20-plus hour gaming experiences. So to have Final Fantasy 15 released only a week before those could be shooting themselves in the foot, all right? Now, let's make this very clear. I know, I already mentioned in the video here that Final Fantasy has a huge installed fan base of fans and people that are going to buy the game no matter what. But the point I'm trying to make is, if Final Fantasy 15 released on September 30th like it was supposed to, the only game coming out for the next 10 plus days was Mafia 3, a game very different from the model of Final Fantasy 15, and quite honestly, they're probably two completely different fan bases. You know, most people who buy Final Fantasy 15 probably aren't going to be buying Mafia 3, and vice versa, right? Not everyone is a huge fan of all kinds of games. So really, until the next week, when there's a few bigger things coming out, including the PlayStation VR that everyone's going to probably be talking about, Final Fantasy 15 would have had a giant amount of time, multiple weeks, where all people would be talking about is Final Fantasy 15. Now you're talking about putting it in a position where it gets 1 week during a holiday time of the year until two other high-profile releases are coming out. Now, Dead Rising 4, kind of a very different game. I don't think that really will cut too much into the market. But South Park is a role-playing game. And South Park, The Stick of Truth, a role-playing game that no one really had confidence in because it had been delayed a million times. A role-playing game that, against all odds, should have failed, succeeded massively, sold 3 million copies worldwide years ago. All right, now let's put this in comparison. Final Fantasy 13 sold around 6 million copies on its release, but that was with the huge hype of the Final Fantasy franchise behind it. That was before they made a trilogy of games out of the game, which no one asked for, before people got lost faith in the franchise, right, with the second and third games becoming progressively worse and worse from the original, with us waiting so effing long for Final Fantasy 15. I mean, Final Fantasy 15 has had such an insanely long development process at this point. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But fans are losing faith in Square Enix. They are. And even though every 10 years or so, let's get our faith back up, just to be deflated again. And with the fact that Final Fantasy 15 has been in development for so long, and so many people, now we're being told finally by Square Enix to get hype, it's coming. Now wait another 2 months. And honestly, let's be honest, what can they do in 2 months? If there's like game crippling bugs, okay, maybe you could fix a few of them. But if this game is underperforming on consoles and it's running like shit, 2 months is not going to fix this game. That is something that should have been fixed a long time ago. And I think, honestly, you know, hearing this late in the game, you know, oh my god, a month and a half before its estimated or promised release date, that it's going to be delayed another 2 months out of nowhere, it certainly doesn't give me any faith in the game. What that tells me is that even though they've had an insanely long development time, they haven't done a good job with this game. Honestly, I think that it's actually saying something about the game. Now, let's be honest here. Is South Park, the Fractured But Whole, necessarily going to cut into the market for Final Fantasy 15? The primary market, the hardcore fans, no. As I already said, the hardcore fans are going to buy this game no matter what. So it could come out on fucking Christmas Day, and they would be at the store picking up the game or downloading it on their console and playing it. They wouldn't give a shit. They'd buy it anyway. But what I'm saying is, by doing this 2-month delay and positioning this game only a week before another high-profile role-playing game, they're cutting into the more casual fan base, a la the mainstream gamers, all right? I want you to put this in perspective. Mainstream gamers, this new force that have come out in the past 5+ years, right, that they put hype behind games that normal hardcore gamers don't even know about. Let's face it, games like Minecraft, was that going to be ever popular amongst hardcore gamers looking for, you know, these full-fledged story narrative kind of experiences? No, but it's one of the most successful video games of all time because it found a new audience, right? And all these people were brought in to gaming from a game like that. So when you look at a game like South Park, The Stick of Truth, do you really think that primarily JRPG turn-based gameplay fans were the ones who bought that game? No. It was the mainstream fan base, right? So what's going to happen here is you're going to get Final Fantasy 15 releasing in late November. You'll get hype for a week. All the fanboys will go crazy over and buy it and hype it, and it'll be all you hear about for a week. And then immediately, once South Park releases, guess what's going to happen? Guess what? All of that mainstream hype is going to just die. Fizzle out. because you've got another game that has more mainstream appeal than Final Fantasy. And that's just the bottom line. South Park, an insanely long-running cartoon series, adult-oriented humor. People found South Park: The Stick of Truth absolutely hilarious, and against all odds, it became a massively successful hit. People are going to be talking about that game. Let's face it, YouTubers are going to say, gee, am I going to continue to play this long, drawn-out JRPG that basically appeals to a fan base, a hardcore fan base in Japan, or am I going to play South Park: The Stick of Truth, which is going to appeal to wide audiences and get me views? Let's face it, YouTubers are going to drop fucking Final Fantasy 15 like a hot rock, and they're going to start playing South Park. I'm just saying. That's business now. This isn't 10, 15 years ago when games sold on the merits of the name of the game anymore. Now they sell on hype on the internet. And the bottom line is, I get the feeling South Park's going to get an insane amount of PR and marketing and hype behind it because it's South Park. Because it's a game that appeals to the mainstream. And now you even got more people who are invested in not invested, but interested in it because South Park: The Stick of Truth was such a huge hit. And over the years, now that this game's been out, it's got more and more people who've played it slowly over time and said, wow, this game's fucking great. I can't wait for the sequel. So I would expect South Park: The Fractured But Whole to sell even more than The Stick of Truth did, while on the flip side, those casual gamers who are looking for maybe an RPG experience may now skip out on Final Fantasy 15. Why? Well, because they don't really get it. It's a Japanese-centric style RPG at this point. It's been delayed, so now you're going to have all this negativity behind it, right? And people are going to be talking negatively about the game because it's been delayed. And let's face it, Final Fantasy 15, because of all the hype behind it, because of all the supplementary materials that Square Enix has put out to hype this game, is now going to basically kind of be a flubbed delivery. And what I mean by that is, there's an animated series that's been coming out for months to hype the release of the game out there on the internet. There's a movie coming out that's supposed to be timed with the release of this game. There's all this supplementary material, and the bottom line is the collector's edition, if you buy the big level edition of Final Fantasy 15, it was supposed to come with all these supplementary materials that were coming out by sometime in September to be timed with the release of the game. Who's going to buy that now? Because you could get that stuff 2 months ahead of time from the actual release of the game. Who in their right mind would spend extra money to get stuff that was out 2 months ago? If you were a hardcore fan, you were going to watch that at launch. So I would predict tons of the collector's edition pre-orders are now going to be canceled and downgraded to the regular edition because everyone's going to want to see that stuff early. They're not going to wait 2 extra months to see the movie and all this stuff tying in with the release of the game. This is a huge PR failure, a huge marketing failure for Square Enix. If this delay is real, this is going to inevitably kill the hype that has been built up among the mainstream gamers for the past couple of years. Like I said, the hardcore people probably won't be affected. And I talked a little bit about this on Twitter this morning. Immediately, I started getting bombarded by people. Bah, you don't understand. Final Fantasy is so good, and Final Fantasy has a fan base, and people are going to buy, blah, 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 blah. And that's what I mean. You're always going to have that hardcore element. But what I think these hardcore gamers aren't realizing is that Final Fantasy hardcore fans are not as abundant as they used to be. This is not the 1990s. This is not the mid-2000s. We're in 2016. This is a largely different gaming landscape. Games don't just sell off of the name and the hype of a fan base anymore. You need to have great marketing. You need to have all that PR. And all this that's been built up for months, the confidence that they've tried to build up in the consumer base is now going to be completely pulled out from under them because they're delaying this game at the very last minute. And now let's talk about this for a minute. Final Fantasy 15, because I got some tweets from people. Well, would you rather have Square Enix release this game unfinished and early rushed out? What kind of a person are you, Phil? You've always said that if the game's better, then it should be delayed longer. True. In any other game's situation, I would probably say that is true. If you know what? If you know it's going to make your game better, and you know that you're going to add significant quality to the game by delaying it, then by all means delay it. I'd rather have the better game, right, than an unfinished broken piece of crap. But Final Fantasy 15 has been in development for insanely fucking long. If you don't know, Final Fantasy 15 actually started as a Final Fantasy 13 game. Because when Final Fantasy 13, the original one, not the trilogy, but the original game was released, it was supposed to be 3 games. It was supposed to be the regular game, and then there was going to be Versus 13, and then there was going to be a 3rd game, and they were supposed to be this big franchise that Square Enix wanted to build around this game. And guess what? They flubbed it. It didn't turn out that way. They ended up making a trilogy of games only on the main RPG style, and the other projects really never kind of came to fruition like they had promised. So this game, in all intents and purposes, has been in development since the same time that Final Fantasy fucking 13 was being developed, alright? It's ridiculous, the long amount of time. Now, of course, is this game the same game? No, the game's been reshuffled and redone, and internally the studio has changed their idea of what they wanted the game to be multiple times. So it's certainly not the same game that I'm sure they were picturing way back when, but still, this game's been in development longer than most fucking games ever on the history of the planet, besides maybe Duke Nukem Forever. I can't think of another game that could have been longer in development than Final Fantasy fucking 15. So, what this tells me, that they're doing a last-minute 2-month delay, honestly, is that they fucked up somewhere. Something is really innately bad with this game. Because with all the marketing and the money that they put into this, all the supplementary movies and content and shit to launch with the launch of the game, they are taking a giant fucking risk delaying it 2 months, and it tells me the game's fucked up. Honestly, that's what it tells me. They fucked up. The game doesn't work. The game has some kind of a critical problem that is just ruining it. And whether they maybe, in my opinion, maybe a memory leak, that the longer you play the game, it just degrades in quality to the point where the game starts crashing nonstop. And a game for a JRPG, that's fucking kiss of death. Because JRPGs are long fucking games. You would expect this game's probably going to be a minimum of 20 hours, if not insanely long, much longer than that. 80, 100 hours in some cases when people do all the content in these JRPGs. So that's a kiss of death. If the game performs worse and worse the longer you play it, right? Maybe the game is like just running like duty on consoles. Well, then what the fuck were you doing all this time during the dev time? Because I played a demo of the game in the summer of 2015. You had a long fucking time to fix these issues. So, I don't know what's going on internally with the development of this game. A game that's literally started development the same time as Final Fantasy fucking 13. And now here we are, how much longer and later, right? It's 8+ fucking years or whatever. And you're gonna tell me the game's not ready, it needs to be delayed 2 months? What the fuck are you gonna fix in 2 months, right? So, I'm gonna be honest, I'm nervous. I am nervous for Final Fantasy 15. When I hear news like this, it's like, something is fucking wrong. It would be one thing if they had never promised a release date or something, and they said, oh, we're just going to delay it again and make it a better game, and we're going to delay another 4 or 5 months. Okay, then you're going to significantly improve the game. 2 months? This is a fucking emergency job to get the game functional, in my opinion. Or else, why else would they be doing this with all the time and effort they put into the marketing? There has to be something innately just crazy wrong going on behind the scenes. Now, listen, I used to be a huge fan of Final Fantasy. I grew up with the Final Fantasy games in the 1990s, and Final Fantasy 4 and 6 are probably still my 2 highest kind of ranked RPGs of all time. But I don't know what Square Enix is doing anymore with this fucking franchise. I just don't. I mean, a trilogy of games with Final Fantasy 13, the second and third progressively worse, right? A failed MMO in Final Fantasy 14 by all intents and purposes. No one's fucking talking about that stupid game. And now this game just being such a fucking a nightmare. It's so why can't you have a game that fucking releases and doesn't have all this drama and shit around it, right? Like, just fucking develop a game, make it concretely good, and release it. No, we have to have all this crazy hype and drama and shit, and delays and supplementary content. Just fucking make a game. And I actually said this on Twitter. Instead of focusing on all the periphery hype and bullshit, just make a fucking game and deliver on your promise. And then maybe you'll get your fan base back. Maybe then you'll instill some more confidence in the Final Fantasy brand that we've lost in the past 10+ years, since every release they put out is worse and worse and fucking worse. Why don't you just try to focus on making a game that's great and don't worry about a fucking movie and a TV series and do this and this and that? Fuck that. Focus on what you're good at, making a great game, and the fans and the mainstream attention, the mainstream fan base will come back, because they're gone. Right now, all you've got is the hardcore. And that's what I'm worried about, is with South Park only a week after, right? And everyone, the thing is, holiday release games, traditionally, a lot of people don't buy them at release. They buy them or they get them for Christmas presents, right? If you're a gamer right now and you just played South Park: The Stick of Truth, right? A couple years ago, you loved that game. What game are you going to ask for Christmas? The next South Park game or this uncertain Final Fantasy game that just got delayed 2 months? I'm just saying. And that's what I think is going to happen. You're going to get that massive attention from the hardcore, but what's going to happen to those who aren't the hardcore fans? Are they going to care about this game? Is South Park going to inevitably suck up all that attention because it is an RPG and it has that mainstream appeal being a TV tie-in series and it has the confidence of the consumer behind it versus, oh, plus, by the way, all the hype. Like I said, everyone's going to be promoting South Park. Everyone's going to be playing South Park. How many YouTubers and other people who promote these games do you think are still going to be talking about Final Fantasy 15 after that initial week when you've got these other big releases coming out? All that hype is going to sink and flow away, except for the hardcore. I don't know. I'm nervous. Now, I'd like to hear your opinion. Obviously, leave a comment. And I fully expect I'm going to get 5 million downvotes in this video, even though I really didn't say anything that negative. 5 million downvotes because Phil said something negative about the Final Fantasy franchise, and he's not a huge fan, sucking the dick of Square Enix, saying that this is going to be the best game ever made, and that it's going to outsell every game ever, and that how dare he say they may be in trouble. This is ridiculous. Whatever. I state my opinions. That's the point of my vlogging channel, so I fully expect it. Whatever. But I want people's opinions. Leave a comment on the video. Let me know what you think about this delay situation. Alright, everyone. Thank you for watching. I can't wait to see this fun sticker at my local GameStop, even though I haven't been to GameStop since May, so I doubt I'll ever see it. Yeah, I don't even care about GameStop anymore. I pretty much just get all my games digitally. But, yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching the vlog. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.